town of the good, the bad, and the weird. You either live by the gun, or you die by the sword.
Welcome to the Good, the Bad, and the Weird Spotlights. I'm Nicho.
And I'm Chris.
And today we are doing continuing Folktober. And this year we have a special guest on the episode. The pair that kind of got me into folk a little bit more, although I found out I've been into it a lot longer. But we have Paul and Sophie from SP Filmviewers on today. Welcome in.
Hello, thanks for having us.
And today we're going back to the UK a little bit on this one. We are doing the Lair of the White Worm, something I had known about for a while. I just didn't get around to it until Paul recommended we do this one for this episode.
A solid choice.
Well, yeah, the reason I recommended it because it was something I was going to do as part of a project for my university course on like the final year, but for other reasons that I went to do another project in the end. But I started work on this and I thought this would be something because I've sort of a background on like the legend of the Lambton Worm, which is this story that this film is sort of based off of. So I thought it'd be kind of good to sort of bring that sort of information on like what I know of it, really, to sort of hopefully bring something towards the conversation, rather than just what the craziness that the film has to offer, in a sense.
Yeah, and I was very curious about this one too because I just finished your episode on the Wicker Man this morning, so I was very curious what Sophie's thoughts on this movie are going to be specifically.
Yeah.
But yeah, so for those unfamiliar, The Lair of the White Worm is based on the Bram Stoker's last novel of the same name, and it follows an archaeologist and local residents as a series of bizarre events begin after discovering a strange skull on a dig site. Which I've had some experience with something like this. Our neighbor, well, not our neighbor, one of our friends in Germany, they were going to be expanding their house, and they found Roman pottery, and so they had to delay the construction until they got out there and dug everything up, and like, okay, you can build again now.
My goodness,
yeah,
can't build anywhere.
Well, I think it's fast. I think this type of folk horror is fascinating just in general because it really starts to explore kind of like the forgotten world of ancients instead of like Wicker Man, where it's like a revival of things. It's, hey, we kind of found this, but this thing's been going on since we forgot about it.
Sure. I also think that the movie does a good job of recognizing that the premise, when done in like visual format, is goofy. Like on paper, Bram Stoker's version reads very nicely, but it would never translate to a visual format without being a little goofy, because reading the words like snake-like human sounds spooky. Seeing a snake-like human looks silly. And I appreciate that this movie like understands that and like kind of leans in a little.
Yeah. So how did so Paul, you said did you find this when you were doing your research, or was it just something that you had kind of known about in your wheelhouse?
No, it was when I was doing my research for university on it. So one of the teachers sort of like recommended it to me, like, oh, obviously this very loosely based on the story of what the myth of it is. So it's like, oh, I'll check this out. So it's kind of stuck with me since then. But it's it in terms of what it actually has to offer in terms of the actual story, it's not much really going off what the film has to offer, but it's just crazy anyway. And it's like, well, I'll just watch it because I'm always interested in seeing what new films I haven't seen before. So, and this one was just, yeah, I don't know if you're familiar with like Ken Russell as a director before or any of his.
I'm tangentially familiar. I know of one of his films that he does reference in the commentary on the movie, The Devils, which is based on the French. It's a French story of the Devils of Loudun, where these nuns went crazy and got sexy and whatnot. It It comes from that era of like the 70s sexploitation or nunsploitation genre. So I know of it. I went to go and try and find it. It's one of those ones that occasionally will pop up on streaming services and then drop off in like a month. So I always keep missing it just a little bit every time. But other than that, I don't think I'm super familiar with his work.
Yeah, I only like have heard of most of it. I'm not like there's a few that I think I'm like a little bit more familiar with, but for the most part, not a ton.
I lied. I've seen Altered States. I love that movie. Are you guys familiar with his work then, I take it?
Well, me, I've sort of vaguely know. I believe, I don't get me if I'm wrong, but I think he did a film called Tommy or something, I think.
Mm-hmm.
Oh,
Yeah.
that's the Pinball Wizard one, right?
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, that's right. Yeah, so I know I've seen that one, and that's a bit out there as well. I think his sort of style, you kind of you know what you're going for with the films that he does. So I think I've seen The Devils, maybe, but I can't remember all of what happens in it. But I know the fact, if you're saying about there's nuns with sexploitation aspects in it, it's definitely apparent in this film as well, isn't there? In those kind of like dream sequences, if you will.
Mm-hmm.
But Sophie? What do you?
Well, I feel like you've thrown me in the deep end here a little bit because I've not got any background of this film or
No.
anything. So I was just like going in blind, wasn't I?
Yeah.
You just showed me the front cover and were like, right, we're watching this. And I was like, oh, okay then. So, yeah, it's not as bad as The Wicker Man. Let's just say that.
Did you get jump surprised by Hugh Grant being in this film? Because I sure did.
He is so young.
The first time I watched it, I didn't realize he was there, and I was like, I think I know that man.
To be fair, he's a typical British boy, isn't he? He's like, I think this is what the cliche of an American woman would think of. It's just a shame that there's not that many of them.
Yeah, I know they said that Russell had said that he was supposed to be like the stereotypical like aristocracy that it's either that or we think of, I know it's shifted a little bit. I know there's like people who assume like Peaky Blinders is super English, or
sure,
you get like what's his name? I just watched some of Guy Ritchie's movies.
Yeah,
you get that side of England. So I think there's like
okay, but like I think for 80s styling, especially like baby-faced Hugh Grant is a solid choice for like representing an entire genre of man.
In the English countryside, yeah.
Yeah, if he's a really good role for this, and to be fair, we've seen him in like Love Actually, Bridget Jones' Diary, all of those kind of films. But he was
I grew up on Notting Hill, so that was my key Hugh Grant movie.
I was gonna say my mom loved Hugh Grant, and so I was not expecting to see him in this.
Hugh Grant wishes that you wouldn't have seen him in this, probably.
You know, I probably understand why he thinks that, but I don't know. I enjoyed his acting performance. Like, none of the acting in this felt poorly done. I was happy with all of it. It's mostly just the story itself that's an absolute whirlwind.
Yeah. I think the one actor or actress in it that surprised me was Peter Capaldi, because I only know him from Doctor Who, so I wasn't expecting a young, fresh face, and he looks quite different than he does now.
Yeah,
so it's
he hasn't grown into the crazy hair yet.
No. But yeah, I mean, honestly, for an 80s movie, when I watched it the first time, I was surprised like how older it feels. Like it feels like it'd be closer to like the early 80s or late 70s kind of styling. But I guess at the same time, it does have that little bit of humor that the early folk horror films don't really have.
I also think it helps that the setting feels very like two-dimensional. There's not a whole lot of like places to be or depth to the backgrounds, which adds to that early 80s feel.
Yeah, no, so there's only like a few locations that the characters are sort of set in, like obviously the outside where the cave is, and then there's sort of like these like couple of houses where they're kind of going between to where the characters reside. So yeah,
even when they go to like the quote-unquote big house for the party, like we get to see like half of a room, and that's it.
Yeah,
which I don't know, to me feels like early 80s horror because like that budgeting just wasn't there to make cool sets. And so like this feels like a very like similar style where like the only depth to any scene we get is when they're outside because that set's free.
Yeah, pretty much.
Yeah,
it's true.
So, Paul, do you want to give us a little bit of history on the lore of the Lambton worm for those who are unfamiliar, like myself and probably most of our American audience?
Probably.
Well, as far as I know, anyway, the legend of the Lambton worm, because I know in this they call it the was it something
The Darby worm or something.
LAMB, which LAMPTON worm. But anyway,
yeah.
It is, as far as I know, the story starts off with it's set in the Crusades, and a young boy is supposed to be going to church, but instead he goes off and goes fishing in the river, and he finds this black worm-like, snake-like creature that he fishes up, and he's like, oh, well, I didn't get the fish, so I'll just chuck it down this well. And then he just goes off on his merry way, but then soon within this well the worm grows and grows, and eventually it's big enough to escape from the well, crawl out and start killing like villagers and sheep and everything. And all this time later on, the boy who's now grown up and gone off to the Crusades and then comes back to the village, and he finds out what the horrendous things that this creature's done. And he's like, right, I've got to put a stop to this. But the trick is for all the people who tried to kill the creature, every time they like cut it up, the pieces of the worm kept growing back, sort of like Hydra in a sense. We cut off the head, 3 more appear, but in this it's kind of just like reforms back to itself. So he had to, I forget who actually the person the person who it was, but anyway, he went to get a special suit of armor made so that it had like all spikes on it, so that when he fought it in the river and confronted it, so when the Lambton worm wrapped itself around him, the spikes cut him and all the pieces like fell apart off it, but they were washed away to the river, so they couldn't reform back to itself, and that's how it was defeated. So I think that is a version of the story that I sort of know from a book. But
yeah, I don't know where, but the spike armor sounds familiar. Maybe I've heard it in something else before. But yeah, that's now that you explained that story, the story is way different. I mean, that's definitely a very biblical. Hey, you skipped church one day and you screwed your entire village. And and this one, one doesn't really have a lot of religion outside of like the snake religion and like the one acid spray on top of the or on the we got the dream sequences too of the nuns.
I feel like the religious part of the lore is probably meant to be like an audience you come in with level, as opposed to like how we usually come into a horror movie, like needing to like be clarified, because we watch so many different ones from so many different places. I think the average person watching Lair of the White Witch White Worm is probably coming in with a base understanding of like Christianity default good, white devil snake bad.
Yeah, I think they kind of do like a very brief overview of it in that song that they play at that kind of like gathering, don't they? With that folky like bands, whoever they are.
I love the song. It feels like something you would put on even without the movie playing, like a good bop. But at the same time, won't lie, I know there was a lot of lore put in there. I had to turn on captions so that I could catch it. I'm not gonna lie.
I think it's more of the Scottish accents they've got going on there. I think, or whatever it is. So,
well, I know Russell incorporated the music because at the time in the 80s, he said there was a kind of folk punk or grassroots music movement that was going on, and the band was made specifically for that movie, and I think that's the only song they have too.
That's kind of disappointing. I think they'd be popular now.
But I think it works well because it does tie into like earlier folk horror. Like this movie is very smart in its writing and knowing its references and nodding to like, hey, we understand all this stuff came before, where like they don't go full on weird musical like The Wicker Man does at times, where it's just like okay, we got another song for some reason.
True. And also the music doesn't feel like too much worked into it. It feels like there would have already been a song at that point of the movie, even if it was just background music. They're already at a party. Might as well combine the two.
It feels very Scooby-Doo and the Loch Ness Monster.
Okay, I'm glad you brought that up. This whole movie feels like a Scooby-Doo parody.
You kind of said that, didn't you?
Yeah, I think I did. Yeah,
because of the two girls.
Yeah, and Sophie says that she can vouch for it in terms of their accents of being Yorkshire. It's not very accurate, or they're very put on.
Yeah, because we actually did a bit of a Google, didn't we? And they are more like Londoners, or one's American, isn't it?
Yeah.
And one's down south, and their Yorkshire accents aren't very Yorkshire. They're a bit too much.
But bit put on.
Being a true Yorkshire girl.
Yeah.
And like you kind of somewhat are.
Yeah. No, we go, but yeah.
We can't. Well, I knew from the get go. I was like, this doesn't feel right. So I think that'd be my only gripe. But I guess somebody else watching it wouldn't notice.
Yeah, maybe. Yeah.
Yeah, I think that's like I think that's part of like something we don't view as Americans is sometimes those accents we don't know the difference. Like I think that comes across on the other side too, where like there's like 3 or 4 different like Southern accents. There's not the one, and the one I do is the very stereotypical Southern accent, like it is very Texas accent.
It is Dallas, Texas. Yeah.
But then like we've got the Southern drawl. You've got whatever your Missouri.
It'd be an Appalachian style, and then there's also just like a Bell form of all of them. Mm-hmm. Yeah, no, like there's a lot depending on where you are. But I think part of the reason why this movie gets away with bad accents, because they are bad, like to the point where even I had to like pause it, go back, try and like piece together what was happening and who said what when. But I think part of the reason why the bad accents work, even if you like do know that they are just completely made up and false, is the whole movie feels just out of this like crazed dream styling at times. So you're like, all right, well, why not have a bad accent in here? Like, why not?
Yeah. Feels
I guess for a general audience it would probably like you wouldn't necessarily twig to that.
The comedy of this movie it's not quite on the same level as like Monty Python, but like the way like they go about it, it's more subtle than I think us Americans are usually used to, or like what we expect from or most Americans expect from a comedy. I watch my comedy is mainly British at times, so
I do think though that it lines up a little bit closer with like Americans B horror movies, where it's like it's bad, it knows it's bad, but it's not gonna like try and make up for any of that. That's just part of how it is. And while this one's not nearly as bad as those, I do think it's like playing into that styling a little bit as part of its humor.
Yeah, but like there's parts where like when Hugh Grant's character shows up in his a Royal Air Force outfit instead of a copper outfit, it's just little things that if we're not looking for it, because it's a uniform, we're like, oh, it's British, that must be their like officer uniform or something. it's not the it's not like the Wicker Man outfit, but it's like it's cut close enough for us.
No, the police officer. Yeah. No, I get you. Yeah, so you wouldn't be like, hang on a minute, that's not accurate at all. Yeah, it's kind of just good, just going with it. Yeah, and just I mean, things like that. I wasn't going like, oh yeah, that's not right at all. But and I guess from previous until I guess Sophie pointed out about the girls' accents and stuff, I didn't really have it didn't take me away from the film too much really. But it's it does on like with another person's eyes on things. It kind of does. Go, I didn't see it that way. But
it's interesting you saying about the humour aspect of this, because I don't like many comedies, do I? And definitely not American comedies. They I don't know, I think because they're so over the top and so unrealistic, it really drives me insane. And this actually is a good level for me. Monty Python, I absolutely hate as well.
That's British. And
I don't like that. So this works. I think I actually did enjoy watching it, even though it was a bit weird and you don't really know what you're looking at when you're seeing it, and coming in from the blue and not knowing what the history or anything like that behind it is. It works, and I think because you've got some really good actors in it, that helps. So obviously you've got Hugh Grant, you've got Doctor Who guy that I didn't even know was Doctor Who. But the snake lady herself.
Yeah, Lady Sylvia. I forget what her name is.
She's so over the top. It's wonderful.
She's brilliant at it, and the way that she moves.
Amanda Donahue.
Yes.
Yeah, they intentionally said that the way they made her move was very snake-like. When she sees the skull for the first time, like, we don't see her legs, so she's doing like this kind of like back and forth motion, so it's more like she's slithering up to it. And I think the way, like, they also do a bunch of like little foreshadowings, like there's always some type of like tube in the background that's kind of always ever present, and then like Hugh Grant's character cuts the worm in half during the dance. It's all just kind of playful of like, hey, this is going to happen down the line, and it's like, okay, that's actually, I mean, it feels very classic literature, or like how classic literature has like the heavy foreshadowing of like, this person moved this stone, which symbolizes 20 things down the line.
But I also feel like she's the most stylized of all of the characters. And I think that really helps add into this, like, almost like that little like level of humor where everyone else in this movie, they're caricatures of people, but they're very toned down, whereas she's over the top. She has greased up hair. It's like done into little coils on the side of her head, like she's going to go to a dance. Like, she's never wearing a practical outfit once in this entire movie.
You mean you don't lounge around in your bra and panties all day with just a robe over it all, just completely open?
I have roommates, so no.
And especially, it's not very, in the British weather that we have, it's not like, unless it's baking hot summer day, it's not really something there you just be wearing a skimpy outfit. No,
she'd be cold, and especially she's got a massive house.
Yeah.
Well, and in her massive house, we only see one room in which she seems to have gotten rid of all of the furniture and just thrown some pillows on the ground.
Well, and that's one thing I have questions about, because like they're like, oh, we didn't know you were back in town. It seems like she only comes around like during spring, summer, maybe. So like, I don't know if it's just something that,
I feel like it was meant to be a play on like the fact that snakes hibernate when it's cold, but at the same time, the way that it's worded is, and like how everyone in the town behaves, she apparently is one of 2 wealthiest people in this entire area, and she's the only other person with a mansion. She snake-like only comes back for summertime, like a hibernating person, and yet she only seems to possess a recorder and a fireplace and like 5 pillows. And I get that it's kind of meant to be kind of like sexy-ish, but like, she literally has no other furniture.
I mean, when you don't have anything else to do or anything else to lay on, you gotta find comfort somewhere, I guess.
I like to think of it as this movie being so self-aware that they're like, snakes don't have furniture. But at the same time,
I don't know.
At the same time, she's very much a human lady.
Yeah.
She does have a basket, doesn't she? Like, she pops out, like, just for that one scene. Yeah.
She does. She has a human basket that she sleeps in. That's the silliest thing, but I love it. It's that level of, like, self-aware absurdity. Where, like, a snake-like human written on paper sounds terrifying. A snake-like person in reality sounds just like a goof.
Well, and some of the absurdity in that, too, like, especially later on in their solution to take her down is the live mongoose. Like, I mean, I know, I wonder where the hell they got the mongoose in the first place, but also just like, this little thing's gonna be what kills her or terrifies her. Like, it's just,
there's also like, they never discuss what type of snake. They're just like, snake, right?
Yeah,
some giant scary snake, and then they assume that the mongoose, which as far as I'm aware, there are not like wild mongooses running around England. Pretty sure.
No,
there
isn't. No,
okay.
no.
That's what I thought. That's what the zoo placard here says, that mongooses don't live there. But like, they're like, yeah, mongoose is definitely the enemy of the snake, the mongoose.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure it's an American thing, or sorry, an African thing, or an Indian, like cobras and mongooses. Yeah,
that's what I was thinking, because like, the only real mongoose stuff that we're ever introduced to is like Rikki Tikki Tavi, which is not English.
well,
It's Indian, I think.
Well, no, I do wonder if that's, I know it works with the movie, but there's also a story, I can't remember exactly where it is, but Jeff the Talking Mongoose. I know there's a new movie coming out with Simon Pegg in it about that. But it's basically this haunting possession. It's like a fun haunting where they had a talking mongoose as their imaginary friend.
I love that.
All right, okay.
I also love that her transformation into a snake is almost non-existent. Because, like, as the movie progresses, she's supposed to, like, Harry Potter, Lord Voldemort style, like, turn into snake person. But where they took a nose off of a man and then gave him jaundice, this person just got colored contacts and some fangs, and I love it.
And also, more at the back end of the film, she becomes blue as well. For snakes aren't normally blue, but yeah.
That's right. She does turn blue. I'd also love though that they put her in a bald cap because snakes don't have hair, which I like that logic.
Except she's got armpit hair.
She does have armpit hair, and on top of that, the bald cap isn't glued down like at all.
I do also like that. It, like you said, it does feel very self-aware of like what kind of budget movie they're making. Because like they were talking about all the practical effects they're doing, like the worm itself. Really cool effects on like the layering and the forced perspective, but the big worm is just two VW bugs that they've kind of dressed up.
Okay, that was something else I had a question on. Is the giant skull that our friend the archaeologist finds at the beginning meant to be the revived snake at the end of the movie? Like, she throws it down there and that's supposed to be the same one? Because if so, that skull to head ratio does not match.
I think it's probably like an ancestor or something. It's called sort of like, I think she's sort of like, as I remember, that she kind of takes it to the Lair and then it kind of like summons it again or something. So maybe it's either an ancestor or it just comes back from the past or something. I don't know, like just resurrection. I don't know.
I think what it is, that first snake skull we see, you're right, it is an ancestor, and this is like one of the descendants that had like 1,000 or 2,000 years to develop. That first snake is, we do see it, but we only see it in the dream sequences when it's wrapped around the cross and the nuns are doing the naughty. And the one really, I think it's funny because like that move, he ended up having to like really tone down those dream sequences, especially the second one, where the nuns are getting raped by the Roman soldiers. He's like, this went on a little too long, and I was told this had to be toned down a little bit.
I think that's a good life choice, really, just in general.
I might be desensitized. I don't know either of your perspectives on that, but I personally thought it was a relatively tame. Even for the 80s, I think it was pretty tame.
What do you think, Soph? Is it
not as bad as the Wicker Man with everyone just kind of doing everything, but I guess it's more rapey, isn't it? But
yeah.
I think it didn't last that long.
No, it was a flash in the pan, really, wasn't it? Yeah.
It was more kind of showing that you can come back, and basically it's, what's the word now I'm thinking of? Reincarnation, isn't it? Basically.
Yeah.
In a sense. So it's showing that you can actually be a past life and be, I don't know, in Roman times. It wasn't so bad. It didn't make me cringe too much. Okay. I think it's more the acting on the girls' sides that I struggle a little bit with. Like, they don't look that scared or petrified, really. I actually root for the snake a little bit in this just because her performance is absolutely fantastic.
Yeah. Well, I think personally, I have friends who absolutely hate dream sequences in the same way I hate flashbacks. I think the way this movie handles it is in a good way, where it's a lot of layering of history and the fact that like the countryside itself is layered in history. You have this, what was once a religious chapel, and then, well, of course, they perverted the Christian religion. So we're probably about 1,800 or something.
Don't think too hard about time in this movie. This movie goes out of its way to tell you real hard, don't think. Just watch.
It's my nature to go and think about it that way. But just the way that history repeats itself, and that we have this snake reappearing in a less religious time, but still an abomination upon the world in general. But just because they do a bit of play on like the class system in this movie too, where like the peasants are still being sacrificed away, and it's the nobility that comes and saves the day again.
So I think all of what you just said is the bones and remnants of Bram Stoker's writing from the original part. That was like his big thing. Like that's what a lot of his works talked about and revolved around, was like man and our society and our ideas is the bad thing. And this movie went, very cool, but what if she was partially naked the whole time?
Yeah.
Yeah, to appeal to the wider audience, yeah.
Well, on that nudity too, the Boy Scout that she seduces,
Poor child.
Apparently he was supposed to be full nude as well, and he agreed to it, but then at the last minute chickened out, and so Russell said that's why he drowned him in the end, was just to like, screw you for chickening out on it.
Honestly though, I like it more. It makes him feel more like a kid who's bit off more than he can chew.
Yeah, definitely. Because I feel like it's an Adam and Eve kind of thing, and then you've got the snake like asking like to eat the apple, and I think that's kind of the equivalent of the snake here. Is like that is like the sexualization of the symbol of the apple and all of that
temptation of it all.
Yeah, and I think that's kind of what we've got with the boy in the bath thinking, I'm going to go with an older woman here.
This is all,
and I can tell my friends and be amazing about it, but in the end, it doesn't work in his favour. And I kind of like that he has his clothes on, because it makes him feel more naive and innocent in a sense.
Yeah, it's true. Yeah, no, they're just that's the other thing I liked about this movie too. There's very few commentaries where the director is joking about stuff the whole time as well. But throughout the entire comedy, the director's just being like wry and sarcastic.
Which I feel like shows though in his movie, like that personality just shines through in how the movie came about.
Yeah, and yeah, I don't know. It is definitely an odd movie in that regards, because that's the one thing with like the tone of the movie is it's constantly shifting between comedy, and then it's got like a little bit of seriousness, because we got to act a little serious, and it's always like Hugh Grant's character who's trying to be serious about everything.
Yeah.
I think that's just like the very stiff upper class that he's supposed to portray, but then and then it goes off in a goofy tangent, like he's also like when he's getting seduced by the snake.
Yeah,
like even that, he's kind of taking it quite seriously too. He's very Sherlock in the fact that she's like, oh, I'm afraid of snakes. Oh, but you're playing Snakes and Ladders.
Yes. Yeah. Something that like it felt like the Snakes and Ladders was meant to be for the audience to joke at, and then the characters became too self-aware.
Yeah. Well, and that was also something he made a snide remark on, that we changed it to Chutes and Ladders, but I remember both as a kid, so like I don't.
I think it depends on where you are.
Yeah, I gotta say, because what like depicting that on a board, for example, what does it look like to you? Does it look like, is it basically like the Snakes and Ladders like they depict there for you, the Chutes and Ladders? Or is it something completely? I don't know what a shoot is in terms of like how do you do it?
It's a slide.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, slides and ladders.
Okay, fair enough. Right. Okay.
And like usually Chutes and Ladders, instead of being like this board game is like heavily snake themed. I think the one that we had when my brother was little was like picking apples themed.
Oh,
okay. So there's a cultural thing there. So I don't know. Yeah, I didn't even think on that until you mentioned it.
I think also just like Monopoly, I feel like these board games get redone every couple of years, which works in Snakes and Ladders' favor, because like that one is so over the top, right? Like that doesn't look like a Hasbro game, but that kind of works because you know what it is. Even if you like call it something different, you kind of have the gist of what the game is, and the fact that it looks like she hand painted it from ages ago and has been like hand passed down family snake treasure works for the goofiness. Like this is her only other possession minus the 2 records and the basket.
Yeah. Well, and like I don't know how much, because I know Ireland's got their own history and whatnot. But I know like the whole story of like at the end, Capaldi's kind of like a Pied Piper, or very St. Patrick-esque, where he's kind of trying to charm the snake with his bagpipes. I know the UK has like 3 species of snakes, and only one is venomous. So
lucky.
Yeah, I don't know. It's There's all these like little goofy things that like, and that, again, how actually kind of clever the writing is, where he's layering history from elsewhere on top of this movie, which
well, and then like all of the snake charming stuff that is portrayed in the movie isn't necessarily like going off of the like realistic street performances of Indian and Turkish snake charming. It's more like the Indiana Jones movie styling of it, because they know that like the audience is going to recognize that best, and like that's also the goofiest version of it.
Exactly, especially when you've got a guy who's the policeman who's been converted, and he's kind of like, he's got the weird eye. He's got a weird eye anyway, but he's got obviously like again the contact lenses going on, and he's got the fangs and everything, and he's like having to dance around while the bagpipes are playing and all that kind of
I don't think he does it as well though. To be fair,
No.
It's not very snake-like, is he?
No.
Well, I'm glad you brought up the eyes, because that's another little thing that Russell snuck in, is the cop can't look you in the eye, so he's very snake-like in himself. He's
yeah, they're
tricky.
looking in two different ways.
Yeah.
We lovingly call that Coco Eyes after my friend's long gone dead dog.
Oh no. But with the policeman at the beginning as well, it's kind of like it's about that comedy element or something like a Monty Python-esque, I suppose, was where he's trying to get his friend or the other police officer to come down to help him out. It's like, oh, I've already got me curry, whatever he said.
Having my dinner.
Having my dinner. It's like, well, come on, just
Well, you've got the car, I can't.
I can't or something. It's like making up shit excuses to come and do it. But yeah, it's just, very comedy and all this other stuff. But yeah.
Well, so I mean, that's one of the things where they like, I don't get some of this movies, and I know, Chris, I'm overthinking this.
Yes, you are. I guarantee it.
But like, if she comes and she has to feed the snake every year, because they talked about last year, the main girl's parents disappeared again. And she's having to feed you'd think she'd have lackeys just living in town, like how Dracula's got like his servant, or like just one or two person.
Get an Igor?
Nah, not Igor. What's his name?
Igor knockoff.
Renfield.
Yeah.
Renfield.
Yeah, like you'd think she'd have a Renfield there, just waiting hand and foot for when she wakes up.
It is okay. So I know you thought about this too much, because I legitimately think she like gets on a plane and leaves. I don't think she hibernates.
Yeah.
I think Homegirl's got like another giant snake somewhere else in the world that she hangs out with during the winter. Somewhere warm.
Maybe
and
somewhere
tropical.
somewhere warmer.
Actually, speaking of the plane scene.
Oh, yes.
Of the dream sequences, that is hands down the most goofy one, especially like, I know they tried and played with the snake motif a lot, where like all the paths are windy, there's not a straight road that they go down, but like he's doing a connect the dots on a crossword puzzle, and it's making a snake.
Okay, not just a snake wrapped around a cross. Which is the worst pattern for a crossword puzzle, because that's just 4 crossword puzzles sat next to each other.
Yeah, but no, it's just got those fun little dumb moments, especially like when the two women are wrestling and he's got like the little pen between his legs,
and he's doing the pen.
So and like all the other dream scenes felt like stupidly artistic, whereas this one just felt like it was there because we had pretty ladies and we've already paid them for the hours.
Yeah.
I feel like Hugh Grant would have been cringing.
I guess he probably would be. Yeah,
it's in his contract.
Yeah. I know historically he hates this movie, so
no, yeah, I can bet, especially based off of everything else he's been in. He's got other better works.
I do have a question on like towards the end of the movie, when the whole serum bit where he gets this, like he injects himself with something else. I forget exactly what it is.
Benadryl.
Basically. Do you think the lab worker was in on it, and she purposely switched the serums?
It's a good question, because obviously you brought up the thing about like a lackey or like Renfield basically for Sylvia to have. So maybe, but I guess I would play ignorant on that and be like, assume that it's just the lab results got mixed up and that was that.
I think it's more like a mindset. Oh, I've got an antidote, so I'm not going to get poisoned or anything by a snake, so I'm going to survive it. So I think it's more like that aspect of it. So yeah, he's got the wrong kind of injection. That is it.
He just picked up the wrong one, or
no, I think he's just been given the wrong one. But I think it's a mindset where I'm not going to get poisoned or die by a snake, so I'm actually going to survive it. So he just goes into a coma. I don't know, or something apart from that syrup is working. But he kind of becomes a snake anyways, doesn't he, in the end? But it lasts a lot longer. He doesn't just die straight away like the rest of him.
Yeah, because he already took it before he encountered her when she bit him. So yeah, exactly. But yeah, he said, "Oh, thank God, it did take its time to work." But yeah, still, yeah,
yeah. And well, I mean, that brings up a good kind of question at the end, because Russell did purposely leave this movie ambiguous, which I actually prefer this kind of ending compared to like say the end of like the 98 Godzilla, where it ends and then during the credits we get that batch of eggs and there's one that's still there. It makes me wonder where this town is going after this, because now basically you have one vampiric snake and
but no snake god.
Yeah, exactly. Like the worm's gone. Like
do people morph into the worm? Like, this movie is so crazy. There's no logic. There's no rhyme or reason. Him morphing into the next great snake isn't that far-fetched.
Yeah. And have either of you read the novel before? Because I haven't.
No, I haven't read No, as far as I've gone with research is that sort of like short story from just reading on the internet about the Lambton worm before and just seeing this film. So I've no context of like what Bram Stoker's take on this story is. So no,
definitely think he's going to go on though.
Yeah, I think the town's screwed, in my opinion.
I mean, the fact that they have lived this long with people going missing and they're literally just up the hill at the creepy mansion and no one bothered to look there, I mean, feels a little Darwin Award-esque.
There's so much to this movie, because like
there is
I don't know. I kind of want a sequel, but I don't at the same time, because I know it would ruin it.
Yeah, it would.
I never once, when I was seeing this film, thinking, "Oh yeah, I'd love to know what happens next." I kind of just took it as like, "Oh, it's just he's evil now, and he's going to get Hugh Grant," and that was that. I didn't for a second think on like, I needed to know what happened next.
However, I do think it would be fun to take the same styling and concept and apply it to other like lesser known like horror books. Like, obviously, Dracula has been done in every left and right every which way. And yet, like, that wasn't the only thing he wrote. He wrote this. There's other ones that could also be done in this like over the top but like silly-ish way.
Yeah, well, I mean, we do have other variations. I know we've got what's his name? The guy who did Rosemary's Baby.
Sure.
Polanski,
Yeah, he did a vampire parody called The Brave Vampire Hunters, I think. And
maybe.
It's kind of that style of parody. But no, I think you're onto something there.
Like vampires, but instead of bats, this time it's snakes. Next time, maybe mice. Time after that, maybe cats. Like, I feel like we could just go work our way down the line.
Like a big cat deity or something, or a rat.
Yes, Scooby-Doo style.
Yeah.
Well, and I think that just speaks to the movie in itself. And, like, I think it's a smart parody of the folk horror genre, where it doesn't take itself seriously. Like, I'm going to go back to it, The Wicker Man.
Sure.
Because that's my favorite folk horror movie still. But it doesn't go full what's that movie? Night of the Lepers? The one with the giant bunnies.
Oh, that one. Yeah, no, we're not like full on making fun of it, but we are having fun with the concepts and the ideas.
Yes.
Yeah, treads that sort of line in between, doesn't it, really, in a sense? Like, you're having fun with it, but there's a sort of serious tone.
Yeah, no, it's kind of like how it's a style that I feel like only older and B-ish movies really can do well. Because I feel like modern movies, there's so much implication, and honestly, like, things look too good to like have this like balancing act where things for an older genre, for folk especially, it's very difficult to balance that, like, we're having fun with, but we're not making fun of. Whereas when you get like newer and newer, it's harder to do that without just being like a full parody, like Shaun of the Dead.
Yeah. And I don't know how popular these movies were in the UK, the scary movies.
Yes. That level of parody.
Yeah. No, they still had to resonate with people over here. So yeah, they're certainly the first three anyway. Yeah.
You don't need to watch any of the other ones. It's okay. They're all this. It's the same movie over and over again. I promise.
One thing I think is interesting about this movie, and I like finding movies like this where it doesn't really find its following either initially in its original country, or it doesn't find its following till later down the line, or it doesn't like the mainstream crowd. Because I know from what I heard from Russell is this movie was kind of hated when it first came out in the UK.
I can see why.
But loved stateside.
I can also see why.
I just think it's interesting how it came to you through a research project that, hey, maybe you'll like this movie. And
I feel though like it makes sense though that an American crowd would see this and like enjoy it enough to buy it or maybe share it with friends, because this falls into like that category of British movie where it's not super well known, but it's also not a bad B movie. Like it's a fairly decently like made and acted movie, so you can get through it in one sitting without any like real heartache. But also it feels just parody enough that like any bits that you don't understand or that don't work, like bad accents or bad costumes, like go so far over your head that you don't care.
That's true. Yeah, don't know about you. So
there's also though definitely an overlap between moviegoers who enjoy finding like the weird little one-off movies from abroad, and English and British movies are easiest to get a hold of here, and also like finding a weird little one-off horror film. Like the crowds who want those two things are usually very much a circle in the Venn diagram world.
Yeah, well, and I think Paul, when you brought up Kurt Russell's movie, or sorry, not Kurt Russell, Ken Russell, his movies, I think he falls in that niche because I really don't know too many people who know The Devils or Altered State unless they're like really into those niche like sci-fi or horror flicks. Because I mean, nunsploitation is not exactly a popular genre anymore, nor was it really popular to begin with.
No, I think you get like one or two big movies that like kind of sort of follow some of the theming that make it to big main theme stuff, but they're usually advertised more as just like a standard horror film that have those elements, like The Nun.
Yeah, and one thing I do like about this movie too is I personally feel, and this probably comes a little bit from just listening to your guys' episode on The Wicker Man. I personally found this movie quite rewatchable, just trying to pick out the little bits. I didn't. Sophie or Paul, did you guys have that same feeling when you're watching it, or?
Well, yeah, I've seen so this film I've seen like many times before, and I think it's not one I'll immediately want to rush back to, but there's a certain enjoyment out of sort of like, you know, I'd say a campy way in the most loose term in some aspects, and then you get those vibrant, shall we say, dream sequences and things that kind of stand out from the norm. Like, oh, I wasn't expecting something this graphic, but I don't know about you in terms of like, would you want to see it again? Basically, because there's certain films you've watched and go, I'd never want to see that again.
Yeah. I'm not writing it off completely. Yeah. I don't think it'd be like, oh, every year I want to see this, or like, give me 10 years and I might put it on. I think it would be one of those for me. It wouldn't be I'd probably
resurrect it again.
Yeah, I'd forget it completely, and then I'd decide to maybe rewatch it. But it's not the best film I've seen, but it's not the worst. It's just somewhere in the middle, I would say.
Yeah.
I think it has that sort of like appeal where it's almost more fun to force someone else to watch it for the first time and watch them watch it. Like I am going to strap individually our friends down and watch this, but not as a group, like individually, so I can see them all enjoy it for the first time several times.
I think I'm banned from doing that personally. So
well, that's because you have a rap sheet. I don't.
So I'm kind of curious what your thoughts are of this movie in the folk horror realm in general, because I've been struggling with this a little bit because after watching Woodlands Darkened Days, what's the name?
Yeah, I know what you mean.
The documentary on Begotten.
Yeah, Woodlands Darkened Days Bewitched, I think it's called, or something like that. Yeah.
Just the way they bring about that folk horror is interpretive, because at the same time, oftentimes I don't feel that creature features fall in that realm, but this is one of those movies where it's borderline both, because with creature features, I know there's the more focus on the creature itself, but this one also has that moments of heavy focus on the creature, and in a way, like vampires are kind of creature feature, and Lady Sylvia is kind of a creature in her own right.
I don't know. I feel like this film reminds me a lot of like the individual, like we have state like folklore or local legends here, like Mothman or the Walking Pants or the Chupacabra,
the folk monster.
Yeah. So like, and like a lot of them are just knockoff Nessies, right? But like we have different ones, and what level of stupidity they are varies depending on where you at. Like there's literally one that's just a pair of walking white pants that walk around in the night. Terrifying.
Someone should make a film about that. Yeah.
I'm waiting for the day.
We'll make it.
We will. It has to come out right after the Mothman movie, though. Just really to get a good comparison of the two. But like this has the same vibes to me in like it's a local legend. It's not.
Yeah.
It's not one of the big three that everyone knows. It's a little bit less well known. It's still big enough though that it's not. It doesn't feel super made up.
Yeah.
Like, it doesn't feel made up for the movie's sake alone. Like, it feels like something that, like, you can research on its own. Like,
well, and
kind of Bigfoot-esque.
I guess in some ways it does, and I don't know if it's just because it comes from Europe, and so us as Americans, I think we default to like
that does help.
Well, yeah, we're so far removed that it delves into that realm of like fairies and folktale that America doesn't really have too much. Because personally, it makes me think a little bit of, and I don't know if you know this the story, but like the German folk or legend of Siegfried, and I forget what that worm's name is, but it's like the German worm. Right. Okay, it's so I'll explain for those who don't know.
Yes, please.
Siegfried's this legendary warrior who killed this worm. He's basically like the German Achilles, and he became invincible by bathing in the worm's blood. But while he was bathing in the blood, a leaf fell on his shoulder, and so that's the one part that didn't get covered in the blood. So that was his one weak point.
Did he not submerge himself? What's wrong with this person?
No, he was just bathing underneath it, and a leaf fell on him.
This is a terrible way to drown yourself in protection.
There's an old like 1919s or 1920s movie that Fritz Lang did called Die Nibelungen that has it, and I think there's a bit of the story in like Django Unchained. It's Siegfried and Kriemhild.
I think the main difference between European folklores, for the most part, and the American versions is it feels like there is always a hero baked in with those tales, whereas the American ones, there is no one out there fighting Bigfoot. He just is.
No, yeah, it's just going into the exploration of it, isn't it, really? Whereas, I guess you could say, like, there's always like a hero story with the Europeans, like St. George and the Dragon, or what's it with the St. Patrick getting rid of the snakes and stuff. So it's like the Pied Piper and all that kind of stuff. Yeah, those kind of stories. Yeah, so
got a hero in it,
and it definitely feels like it adds to like a folklore style movie having it that way. Whereas like having it just be on folklore in general can feel a little bit less like folklore and more like a creature feature, like you said.
Yeah.
Yeah, I know in terms of what folklore means, it can be quite interpretive, really. But as I see it, folklore should really be obviously something about like a story or rumors of like a tale of something or other that happened that kind of was set in like the olden times, the ancient times, or something like that, and it's kind of like coming back. However, it's interpreted in terms of like a modern setting. Like I think there's one film from that set, the All Haunts Be Ours set, where it's like some girls heard a story at school, and she was in Australia, and I forget what they were called, but these little demon characters, and that was kind of like that was the basis of what the folk lore aspect of the film was, and it kind of came into play later on a little bit.
Yeah, it's that one where it's got a weird name to it. I can't remember. It starts with a K or something. It's not The Dreaming. It's the other one, the other big Australian one.
Oh, it's going to annoy me now. I think it's like not Christine, something like that. It's a very it's a child's name or something, but I forget what it was called. But anyway, yeah. So it's in terms of like how this works in terms of a folklore sense, it does the job in that sense, because there's obviously the story, the legend of the creature, so that is there, the basis, but there's obviously a bit more going on in terms of what the characters are kind of going through as part of that story, and so it's crazy, isn't it, really?
For you to say that, then for me to be like, oh, it's not too bad, is quite rare. I'm not a big folklore kind of. The only folklore I would say is Taylor Swift's album. I'm the massive fan of, probably. I won't say the actual films. I am probably not. You kind of forced me
with
through
Wicker
them.
Man, yeah. Been one of the first, if not, the only other than this one. But
this one was a lot better.
Yeah.
Will say I quite enjoyed it.
Yeah, I'm glad that you brought up the idea of the hero. It makes me think, like, because that was one of the things I struggled with trying to understand folk horror of different countries, especially like Far East, and then like some of our stuff where I didn't think it was folk horror, like Candyman.
Sure.
Where we were talking about it the other day, and Candyman's just Bloody Mary, but set in Chicago.
But Bloody Mary is a folk legend.
Yeah.
She's just not a very spooky one.
Yeah. I think that's an interesting thing, just especially like because a lot of our folklore comes from Old World Europe, but ours doesn't really have that ancient land or hero to go along with it, because Lair of the White Worm is very much that heroic story, just repeated in a more modern setting.
Sure.
Mm-hmm.
Any other points we want to talk about on this before going to the ratings?
No, other than I think there's obviously just like, we've talked about throughout with like how the sort of like the sexploitation stuff that's going on, but like things with the phallic symbols of the snake is in itself, you could class that as a phallic symbol, couldn't you, really, for
Well, yeah, and the ending with the obviously you've got the Virgin being hanged
sacrificed,
across,
and that she has that strap on that she kind of puts on to all those kind of things. Is like,
yeah.
Well, even the first snake we see on the cross is kind of penisy in its own way. Like it's very phallic in its own right, rather than like, it makes me think of more. What is it? There's these types of worms there's these types of snakes that they found recently that they look like worms, but they look kind of like that, just pink and worm-like.
And it's a snake.
Yeah.
And like worms throughout like history and symbolically, since they've always been associated so closely with like the devil and the original sin, it's always been kind of like tied one-on-one, and so you've always just kind of associated it with, sin and sexuality. So it's an easy like correlation to continue on with this film, especially since we've got a sexy snake lady as the villain. And she's by far like the most promiscuous one in the film, minus the weird dream sequences.
Yeah.
And even then she's in some of them.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I definitely think there's quite a bit that this movie has going for it. But so scoring, we're gonna do our good, bad, and weird scale. We don't really do a point system on this show. So
yeah,
Sophie, do you want to go first? Good, bad, weird. Any combination of those three. What are your thoughts?
Okay, so good is just seeing young Hugh Grant. I feel like that's just the solid part of the film. It's, I don't know, I do have a soft spot for Hugh Grant. I think anything he's in is pretty much golden, and you can't really complain, even though he doesn't like the film. He's not really that bad of a performance, really, within it. So then we've got bad. I would say it's the Yorkshire accents for me, just because I'm a Yorkshire girl. I know what this should sound like, and they don't. I want alts and notes in there, and any other kind of Yorkshire slang, but there isn't. And then the weird, it's probably just everything we've just been saying, isn't it? About the dream sequences to the what's the other bits? Just
in general. Yeah.
Just in general, the way the plot of the whole kind of yeah. But overall, I think it's quite enjoyable. I wouldn't really say it's completely bad.
It's an experience.
Yeah. It's definitely an experience.
So the full good, bad, weird trifecta for you then.
It's all the points.
It did. It made it easy to kind of put it through that ranking.
Yeah. For me, the good, as a fan of like creature feature stuff anyway, and I guess from obviously researching in university and stuff. So the worm itself, it's quite like a terrifying sound it gives off as well. Like, you know, when it's doing that sort of roar that it's got and everything. And it does look a bit tacky. That's maybe one of the bad sides of it. But again, forgive it for all the other stuff that's going on with that, and the weird aspect is. Well, I also sort of touch on the bad. Also, I mean, you can't do nothing about it now, but some of that blue screen, green screen stuff that's going on is a bit like, oof, yeah. But again, you kind of forgive it for take it for what it is, and the weird is again just like some of those, like that one particular dream sequence where Hugh Grant's on the plane. And he's like, what's this got to do with anything, really? Other than the fact that he's having some, like, thoughts about her, you know, the Lady Sylvia, perhaps. But other than that, I don't know. Seems odd.
I'm also just now noticing you're wearing a snake shirt today.
He is.
That's definitely, that wasn't intentional. I just threw it on.
Funny fact, though, you really like snakes, but you don't like worms.
I know, but worms are actually slimy. Snakes aren't slimy.
Some snakes can be slimy if they're shedding the skin or something like that. But yeah, he doesn't like worms, which I just think is really strange because a worm can't harm you.
No.
So, Chris, what do you give this movie a rating?
I know normally we hold good, bad, weird for like a perfect movie.
Mm-hmm.
However, every single scene of this movie has all three elements in it. And so while I am not saying this film is like a masterpiece worthy of every single person on Earth seeing and enjoying, I do think it is the full trifecta. I think it has great moments that are really entertaining. Like, it kept my attention right from the get-go. It has good acting, it has good dialogue, and the humor is funny. It has really bad moments, but it knows it and it like embraces those moments. And the entire premise is weird, and I love that.
Yeah, I also, too, am a little bit reluctant to give it the holy trifecta. Just because, for me, dream sequences are always open to being weird. And it just kind of feels like natural that they are weird. Whereas, like, a normal dream just feels kind of weird in its own right, you know?
Sure, but this movie has a woman who is not in a dream sequence sleeping in a basket in her living room.
Yes. No, and yeah, I think I do have to give this one the holy trifecta again. Just
good choice,
especially with like the mongoose, the bagpipe Pied Piper at the end. Just everything that goes into it, and especially like that second dream sequence where it feels like a just like late night public access television show that
it sure do, doesn't it?
Accidentally stumble upon at 2 a.m.
It's that short background screen cutting everything off.
Yes. Yeah, I think this movie has it's one of the rare ones that gets the holy trifecta across the board.
Yeah, that doesn't mean it's like the best thing I've ever seen, and
No.
I'm not gonna make everybody watch it, but every horror fan I have, they will be watching this.
So we do also have a secondary rating. Paul and Sophie, would you recommend this movie?
I would on a very low level of like, of curiosity of like, if you want something different.
You kind of already have somewhat recommended this
Yeah.
film in
Yeah.
a sense
Yeah.
because you were the one who like put this forward.
Yeah,
so
yeah.
you can't really say no.
No, I know that. But in terms of like, in a general sense of like for people who are fans of horror, then it might be a hard sell. But for friends I know, like, oh yeah, go and watch this. This is the greatest thing ever. They're probably like, no, it wasn't. But, for people who like things that are a bit out there, then yeah, absolutely, would recommend a recommendation.
I don't think I'd recommend this. I don't think any of the people that I know would want to watch this.
No, definitely not from your like work colleagues or anything like that. Yeah, they wouldn't.
They'd be like, "What the hell are you watching, Sophie?"
Chris, would you recommend this movie?
To an extent, yeah. It depends. Like, I'm definitely going to force my loving husband, who did not get to watch this because he was watching a garbage movie with you boys while I watched it. So like, there are people I'm going to make watch it, but not as a recommendation. They will be forced to watch it.
Yeah, I think I'm on the fence. I think for the Halloween season, it's definitely at least worth a watch once.
Mm-hmm.
In general, I'd say for horror fans, yeah, it's worth watching. It's got a lot to it that I think they'd enjoy, especially like if you like older horror films. But in general, yeah, it's going to be hit and miss on who I even recommend this to. Now, I'll tell people about the movie and won't be surprised that I'm watching something like this.
No one will be shocked.
But I don't know if they'll go out and watch it, is the thing.
Probably not.
Yeah. So, Paul, Sophie, go ahead and plug your guys' stuff.
Okay.
I'll leave it to you.
Right, okay. So, we are a movie review podcast called SP Filmviewers, where more often than not, we get you to see a film for the first time and get your honest opinion on it, such as The Wicker Man, which we've done for spooky season this year. So that's one example. But we've covered all sorts of things like, like Back to the Future, The Matrix, Spider-Man series, the Tobey Maguire ones, and things like that. But and then every other week it's like a new. But we started to do where we're watching films that neither of us have seen because there's so many other films I've yet to watch for the first time.
Giving you a chance to actually watch new films.
On things that I buy specifically as well. So we are on all the major podcast platforms, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Podbean, and give us a listen. And we're obviously on the social media on Instagram, Twitter, Threads, and TikTok under the handle SP_Filmviewers. If you want to find us on there and give us a message and like, comment, subscribe, and all that good stuff. Yeah.
I definitely would recommend your Wicker Man episode. It was a fun listen to. You guys are always great to have on a car ride. Nice, calm, chill. Break from the manic stuff I listen to. So, but anywho, this has been the Good, the Bad, the Weird podcast with SP Filmviewers.
Thanks for listening, and thanks for being here.
Peace.
Thanks very much.
Thanks.
Peace. Thank you for stopping by this here town of the good, the bad, and the weird. We appreciate your listenership, and if you want more of our takes in your life, feel free to check us out on social media at The Good, the Bad, and the Weird Podcast, or TGTBTW for short. As well, if we missed a fact, your favorite part of a movie, or just have a suggestion and want to reach out and say howdy, feel free to email us at tgtbtwpodcast@gmail.com. And feel free to join our Discord at The Good, the Bad, and the Weird Podcast, where we talk about movies, just share random banter here and there. And always check out our podcasters, streamers, or any other content creator we shout out in our episodes. We really appreciate it. And as always, thank you for listening. Peace.